Okay, so today we're going to be working on a city scene. Um, and this is an interesting lesson because we won't be working on finished drawings. We'll be working on a process called thumbnailing because when working on a composition, the important thing is the composition, not the final details. It's a process to reach those final details, but we're going to be focusing on the very first step because that's where most of the mistakes are made and solved. So let's go with the very first thing. When sharing an image, let's try to ensure that it's in the way that it's meant, that we can see the image in the way that it's meant to be seen. So if we're looking at it on our sides, we have to either rotate our head or download the image into an image editing program to look at it. And if you're catering to a general audience on Facebook, they're not going to go through that process to check your work. So let's make it easier for people. Number two, we want to create thumbnails. Thumbnails is what allows us to do our thinking really quickly and figure out what the city scene should look like. So if there's a city, why am I seeing only a garage next to what I'm assuming is a gym and a street light? It actually looks more like a town. So what are some better ways to compose this image to make it look more like a town? Maybe there's a hill over there. And I'm just sketching. I have no idea what is going to come out right now. So maybe there's a garage, there's a gym, and there's a street light. That's one composition that we can have to have better distribution of the shapes. Um, I'm not happy with that though, so I'm just going to keep going. And that's literally the point, to draw it as soon as possible without worrying about perspective or anything like that, or three-dimensional forms or anything like that. The whole point is to get down shapes to create a pleasing composition as fast as possible. And to aid in that endeavor, another thing I'm doing is drawing really, really small. This size that you see it at full screen is probably the size that it would appear on my piece of paper as well, and not just on the computer. It's called thumbnails because the idea is that it's supposed to be as small as your thumbnail. But most people can't draw that small, so let's try to aim for the size of your thumb. Um, let's see, I've got this sort of perspective going here. Maybe what I can show is maybe there's a garage there. Maybe some stores here, buildings and things like that, storefronts there. And in the background, there's some more. That looks more like a city. Um, Problem with this is we're going to need a sidewalk here. Maybe something like that. Maybe more storefronts there, some signs and things like that. But we don't want to block our main focus, which is that garage right there. Doesn't have to be perfect alliance, it's just you're just putting things down quickly in the general proportions of the paper you're drawing it. So if I'm drawing on a vertical paper, my thumbnail box will look like that. If it's a skinny piece of paper, it's going to look like that. The idea is that you want to use the format, the aspect ratio that is closest to your final image as possible. So let's see, what other options do I have here? Maybe something like that. Maybe something like that. Okay, so what do I have there? Now I need um, maybe a sign there. Maybe that's just a boring sign. If it's a garage, maybe it's a giant tire on top. How's that work? That could work. Then maybe I've got a fence over there. Some street lights right there. Maybe something in the foreground like that. I'm not happy with that line. Maybe here we have a car. Same thing right there. Cars right there. Again, it's not in perspective. I'm not worried about scale or anything like that. I'm just playing with shapes to figure it out. And once I get something I like, I'll get to the process of cleaning it up, enlarging it, and perspective and construction, all in the appropriate order. Maybe something like that. What else? What other options can I do? Seems to be I'm looking down on this object, on this scene, so maybe one way of handling it is throwing in a perspective grid to help me figure out, just come up with some patterns and see if I can create something interesting there. When creating a composition, it's important to know what you want and the feeling that you're going for, more than perspective or construction or any other thing like that. So maybe the focus is this car. What does it need now? Trying to figure that out. Maybe it's part of a futuristic house design that could be composed better. So let's say I do it like something like that. Trying to figure out the car there. Something like that, maybe. Maybe just a little bit bigger. And I'm literally just scribbling right now. That's okay. That's all you really need to do. You don't need much more than that. That scale felt a little bit off. Um, Maybe some fences right there. Big old tree right about there. Sidewalk. Maybe that needs a bigger front yard. So the fence comes all the way down there. Maybe we have a winding path there, sidewalk right there, maybe another fence right there. So there are literally a million different compositions I can come up with, and all of it matters on my intentions. What's more important? A good way to come up with interesting compositions is just start throwing down lines randomly and see what different shapes you can come up with. So, this is, you know how when you look at a cloud and you try to decipher what shapes are there, or you see a random pattern in the fibers of a towel, or how people see the Virgin Mary in an orange or a wood stain. That's because as humans, we're very good at making out patterns. So if you're ever stuck on what to come up with and you have no ideas, maybe just throw down some random lines and see what you can come up with. So here's something. I really like this shape right there. And you're by no means stuck to those lines that you threw down. You can always change and erase them. But it helps getting started. It helps start seeing an image. Um, so maybe here is like a house, a roof of a house. And here is sort of like a cul-de-sac or curved street, because straight lines and verticals and horizontals are generally boring. And if you can get some straight lines in there, that would help build up some interest in your, uh, help make your compositions a bit more interesting. So gonna try to keep that as a composition. Maybe there's a little kid right there staring at the house. So those are already some different ways to handle and get a more interesting composition. Um, Certainly more interesting than what we had originally. Let's see what I can convert this into, or what we had originally if it were a thumbnail. So if we were to start out with this as a thumbnail, shrink it down to that size, you can compare it and see which thumbnails are working and which aren't. For example, this one, we've got a lot of empty space here and here. One thing we can do is maybe throw in a building right there. Maybe it's a house. Um, Maybe it's just a regular type building right there. That helps stop driving the eyes off the page. Um, when you have a lot of empty area like this, your eye wants to sit here, when instead the focus is this building right here, or supposed to be that building right there, I'm guessing. Depending on what your focus is, you'll want to change how you handle your composition. So that might be one way of of stopping the eye from leaving the page and staying at the focus. So those are some composition options. When I'm doing this stuff, I would literally have a goal in mind and do as many thumbnails as necessary in order to reach that goal. So I might end up with 100 or 200 different thumbnails. But seeing how fast I work at this size, at this looseness and roughness, um, it actually takes me very little time to come up with those 200 thumbnails. And I'm just literally throwing it, throwing stuff at the screen or on the paper and seeing what sticks, seeing what works. And after I finish, I analyze it and I see what I like and I make little changes to emphasize that in the next thumbnail. So, for example, this image right here of a little boy staring at a house, I like that idea. So maybe I create another image of that. And there's my little boy. Rule of thirds going into effect, more or less. So let's keep him right there. One thing we can do is sort of show like a porch. Maybe more right there. And his house in the background. Maybe a tree to frame him. Maybe other houses right there going down into the distance. And there's somebody else standing right there. Maybe some bushes there to keep the eye from leaving the page. That's one way to handle it. Window right there. Another way to handle it is from the boy's point of view. So maybe he's right there. Another home right there. And again, I'm not too worried about details or anything like that. I just want to get the idea across. And see what interesting compositions I can come up with expressing that idea. Might make him a little bit bigger. Something like that, maybe. And I just keep editing it, refining it until I found something I liked. That might take me who knows, however many tries is necessary. But the important thing is just keep going and figure out what it is, what story you're trying to tell, what your focus is in the image, and the best way to compose that image. I hope that helped.